Okay, hi everyone. So, solving quadratics by completing the square. The reason I've written this thing as y equals at the start is just to reiterate that completing the square, so in other words, writing a quadratic in this form, so remember this can be plus or minus q or plus or minus a, this can, like any quadratic can be written in that form. It doesn't have to equal 0 in order to do it. It's only the solve element which says write your quadratic equal to 0. So write it in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, okay? So there are a number of advantages for completing the square or things that you would use it for. So for example, when you're doing functions, if you're trying to find the inverse function of a quadratic, you need to write that in completing the square form to rearrange it. You can solve with it, like I said, and you can also find the minimum of a graph really easy, because if you have this, where a and q are positive, let's say, the minimum of that graph is going to occur when x equals minus a. So the reason I'm saying that is whatever is inside the bracket, whatever value of x makes that bracket 0, right? So if x was minus a, notice this whole thing would be 0, and you're just left with what's on the outside, so y equals q. So the coordinates would be minus a, q. You are going to talk about this later when you get into A level, but just very quickly, the reason why I've said make that inside of the bracket 0 is because if it wasn't 0, then anything squared is going to produce a positive number, and therefore your y is not at its minimum point, because this number is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Add q. So the smallest that y can possibly be is when this bracket equals 0, because you're just left with q. Because otherwise, a negative or positive squared is just making your y bigger, okay? So if you had y equals x take 2 squared minus 10, your minimum of the curve would be 2, because to make that bracket 0, x would be 2, and therefore you'd just be left with minus 10. So it makes drawing graphs very easy, because you know where the minimum or maximum point is straight away. Okay, and also one last plug for completing the square. Those people who love the quadratic formula, right? There are loads of people who say, "Oh, I hate completing the square," and you know you're not my friend if you do that, because if you say that, because that quadratic formula was made from rearranging completed the square form. Completing the square made that, okay? That's like saying, I like chicken, but I don't like egg. And you're like, well, the egg made the chicken. Oh, but did it? Don't start getting into that. Let's not get into that. So what we're going to try and do is, we're going to write this quadratic in the form of completed square, right? So that x plus a squared plus q form, and we're going to solve it, and solve means set this thing equal to 0. So we're going x squared minus 4x minus 2 equals 0. There is a formula for this, but I kind of want us just to see how it works without the formula, and we can just kind of do it naturally. So what we're trying to do is we're going to make this x squared minus 4x into a set of square brackets. And then basically we need to adjust. That's what we're trying to do. So what do I mean by that? I mean, as long as this number in front of here is a 1, which it is, it needs to be a 1 in front of there. If it's not a 1, or it's a minus or something like that, you need to take a factor out if the whole thing equals y. But if the whole thing equals 0, you could just divide by minus 1. So I'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. So in this case, this is a 1. Hooray! So that means that x squared there, you just need to put the square root of that inside here. So the square root of x squared is x. Here's a minus, so therefore that needs to be a minus, right? So if it was a plus, that would be a plus 2. Or if it's a minus, then inside there, that would be a minus. Then we need to put in half of that number, so half of 4 is 2. We do not need to put an x in there, okay? So the reason we've done this, because at the moment we're going to check what we have. So write x minus 2x minus 2. What do we have? We've got x squared minus 2x plus 4. So here we have x squared minus 4x plus 4. So here we've got x squared, very happy. Minus 4x, very happy. But here we've got plus 4, right? But we don't want plus 4. okay, we want minus 2 in the end. So what we're going to do is, because remember we're only completing the square at the moment of this bit here, we're writing this in square form brackets. So we have a plus 4 here, so we need to get rid of that plus 4 by minusing 4. So notice that's the same as minusing whatever is on the inside squared here. Okay, so that number in there, that whole number, so if it's minus goes in there, or if it's plus it goes in there, but you must put the brackets in there. Because remember what we said in the previous video, if you write minus 2 squared in your calculator is going to go 2 squared times by minus 1. So you have to put brackets around the minus 2. Okay? So at the moment, that, if we expand all that out, is the same as this minus 4. So that means we have this first bit, x squared minus 4x. But there's a minus 2 on the outside. So we need to write the minus 2 on the outside as well. So let's just put that together. So we get x minus 2 all squared minus 2 squared is 4, minus another 2 is minus 6 equals 0. So that means we have written it in the completing the square form. But we want to solve. So solve means find the corresponding x values associated with that. So we're trying to get x equals. So to do that, we need to move that minus 6 over. So we're going to go x minus 2 squared equals 6. We then need to get rid of the squared. So we're going to square root, which means we plus or minus the square root of 6. You must put plus or minus. Again, this link with the discriminant. If you applied the discriminant to that, you'd find b squared minus 4ac is more than 0, which means you'll get 2 real distinct roots. And that means we must have a plus or minus here, because otherwise we wouldn't get 2 roots. And then we need to add on this 2. So we've got x equals 2 plus or minus root 6. So there we go, there's your 2 solutions. X equals 2 plus root 6, and x equals 2 minus root 6. I'm aware that completing the square is something students find quite hard. So let's do another example of that, quicker this time. So remember it says solve, so this thing equals 0. And it does. Perfect. So we're going to write something squared here. So is that a 1 in front of there? Yes. So we can put the square root of that thing in there. That's x. This is a minus, so that needs to be a minus. And this is an 8, so that needs to be half of that, which is a 4. Remember, if you multiplied that thing right now, you get x squared minus 8x plus 16. We don't want plus 16, okay? Because at the moment, we're only doing our square brackets for x squared minus 8x. So notice that is the same as minus whatever's in that bracket, whatever's in that part that I've circled there, all squared. Okay, so that's minus 16. So that gets rid of that 16 here. So we are happy because we have what we started with, but look, there's a plus 1 on the outside. So we still need to include that plus 1. All right? So here we've got x minus 4 squared minus 16, that's 16, plus 1, so that's minus 15. So always there should be a minus there. Always there should be a minus, well, no. Always that should be a minus, okay? And obviously it doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be a minus there because the number we're plussing here could be bigger than what we had. So we'll just leave it like that. But we need to make x equals, that's what solve means. So we go x minus 4 squared equals 15. So move the 15 over. Then we need to square root, but we need our plus or minus square root of 15. And then we need to add the 4. So here we have x equals 4 plus or minus square root of 15. Done. So this time, I'm going to do this one a bit faster. So hopefully you get the point now. So we need to solve. So we set our thing equal to 0. Is there a 1 in front of that? Yes. So we're going to go, square root of that thing is x. There's a minus there, so we put a minus there. Half of that number, 5 by 2. It doesn't matter if it's a fraction. Minus, and now we know it's this whole thing inside there, all squared. And then what do we have left? We have a minus 2 left. Because remember, this section only deals with this section that I've put here, all right? So we get x minus 5 by 2 all squared, minus, and then minus 5 by 2 all squared is 25 by 4, minus 2, Minus 2 is the same as 8 over 4. So what do we have? X minus 5 by 2 squared minus 33 over 4 is 0, and then we apply the same logic. So we need x equals. So x minus 5 by 2 squared equals 33 over 4. We need to get rid of the squared, so we're going to square root both sides. Remember, we need the plus or minus there. Okay, and then we need to add our 5 by 2. So 5 by 2 plus or minus 33 over 4. Cool. Now, in your booklet, you have sometimes, this is the last point I'm going to make, in the booklet you have sometimes a number in front. So let's say 2x squared minus 5x take 3 is 0, right? So this would be example D. We're not going to panic, because we know this number in front needs to be a 1. So we need to divide by whatever number is in front of that x squared first. So if I want this to be a 1, I'm going to divide everything by 2. So I get x squared minus 5 by 2x minus 3 by 2 is 0 divided by 2, which is still 0. And then we can complete the square as normal. So there's a 1 in front of there, yes. So what do we need there? We need an x, so the square root of x squared is x. There's a minus there, so minus 5 by 2 divided by 2 is 5 by 4 squared, take away whatever's in that thing squared, so minus 5 by 4 all squared, and then what's left? Minus 3 by 2 equals 0. Okay, so that's how you deal with a situation like that.